Welcome to the Average Christian 2.0. We are talking about the Pharisee and the tax collector in Luke chapter 18. If you want to turn and read along with us there. I'm Zach.
I'm Clayton.
And I'm Maggie.
And this is simply a project about what it means to have a relationship with God, how to live that out in practical terms. And we throw in a little bit of accountability for us as Christians. And this is just a Bible discussion that will cover different topics and also different passages. So let's get into the Pharisee and the tax collector, or the publican, depending on your translation. I'm in the English Standard Version in Luke 18 and verse 9. He also told this parable to some who trusted in themselves that they were righteous and treated others with contempt. Two men went up into the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee, standing by himself, prayed thus, God, I thank you that I'm not like other men, extortioners, unjust, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week, give tithes of all that I get. But the tax collector, standing far off, would not even lift up his eyes to heaven, but beat his breast, saying, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. I tell you, this man went down to his house justified rather than the other. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, but the one who humbles himself will be exalted. First things that come to mind, I think, because we're negative people by nature, the first thing that comes to mind is, that guy's a jerk.
That's very true.
What a slob. Standing there in prayer, I thank you. I'm not like this slob, or that slob. And so you have a balance here between not just arrogance, but spiritual arrogance, and then humility as well. And so that's what we're looking at here. The negative being, of course, not to be arrogant like that, which I think is like, as a Christian, the dumbest thing you can do is be spiritually arrogant. What do you add? It's almost like he's saying, God, you're lucky that I'm on your team.
Yeah.
Well, it's like you read the Bible, but yet you missed the whole point.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What were you saying?
No, I was saying, I was like, why does this guy even matter? He's like an ant compared to God.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly. It's just absurd. Like, we get everything from God, and nobody's any better. And you have all of these passages about loving the other and uplifting the other. And then you have a sacrificial God we serve, and he's by himself. I can't imagine, I don't know, standing or, he's standing there, but just the face, the expression on his face, probably some wordiness in there. You've heard people arrogantly pray before?
oh, yeah.
What does it sound like?
Well, it's a lot of words.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
that's right.
A lot more words than I ever want to hear.
Checking the watch. I'm like, all right, I've went 5 minutes.
Get
How
to
much
the
longer
point.
can I go?
Right.
Get to the point, dude.
You already prayed for them once. Yet again. Anyway.
Well, it's almost akin to, I kind of cringe when someone, and they may not even be a Christian, they may not be in a religious setting necessarily at all, but saying things that in relation to God or whatever, and they're saying these things, and you're just kind of cringing, thinking, man, they're really going to get struck down any second now.
Start backing away.
Yeah, just back away from them. That's to me, that would be like the same thing, and be scooting away from this dude when he started talking.
Right.
I don't see how in the world you can say that and not be a little bit scared.
Yeah. Yeah. And some of them do it like, it's like a phrase that started to take off and it didn't, called humble bragging.
Oh, the humble brag.
Right. I don't hear people use that anymore, but they'll be talking about, I fed, this homeless guy the other day, and I thank God that I was able to do it and feed him.
You see it all over Facebook,
oh,
though.
my goodness. Please stop.
It's awful.
So,
it's not awful, but I don't understand.
No, it is awful. It really is, because you're like, no, they don't represent us.
And then everybody in the comments, oh, that was awesome.
Yes. And you're like,
behind
please.
the screen, they're like, oh, I feel so much better about myself.
I mean,
I think Facebook was created by a Pharisee, wasn't it? Because it seems like that's all you see on there. Sorry, Mark.
Right. It's painfully obvious. I mean, humility is obvious too, but it's just painfully obvious. You said you've heard it in prayers with wordiness. I've heard it. Oh, that's where I can do it because well, anybody can, but I'm a preacher, so I go hard on preachers and the arrogance behind that. I have baptized more than so you dunked a bunch of people in water. What?
So have serial killers.
Right.
They just didn't let up.
Or tell anyone about it.
Or tell anybody else about it.
Oh my goodness, I wasn't expecting that.
Sorry.
So silly serial killers. So you got this. Why is this guy? The question we have to ask, and I don't want to go through a big history lesson, which is why I'm not going to bring up all about the Pharisees. They get a bad rap. A lot of times Jesus uses these guys and says, hey, if your faith isn't greater than these guys, you'll never enter the kingdom of heaven. They were good at knowing the law. So where's the arrogance come from then? How does he get to feeling like?
Seems like I'd read, I can't remember what the passage was, but it's talking about how they almost judge their godliness by how well they follow their laws.
Exactly.
Or how many of them they follow.
Absolutely.
And kind of boast and say, all right, I've kept every single one of them this week. So I'm better than you because I saw you miss that one over there.
Oh yeah, police.
Thing, seems like I can't remember where the passage was, but I had read something that kind of led me to believe that was kind of.
Well, when Paul gave his rundown
mentality.
of Philippians 3 of how he was like the Hebrew of Hebrews, it was like a laundry list. So if he had that mentality, you could, not that Paul was a Pharisee, but you could see that sort of, I was Hebrew stock, of this tribe and did this and all that. Well, this guy does it here. What does he say? Let's go. I'm in my notes here. He says what? I'm not like these other. I fast twice a week. I give tithes of all that I get. So
right, he's got his list of rules, and he's like, look, I did that one, I did that one, and that one, and that one, and that one. So I've got to be better than these other people,
right?
Because they don't do that,
right?
I found a really cool article on Focus magazine about spiritual arrogance, and it was talking about the pride of knowledge.
Ah, there you go.
And now knowing God's word ought to be the passionate prayer of every believer, but once received knowledge has the tendency of creating pride. And it goes to talk about in 1 Corinthians 8:1, where Paul writes, knowledge puffs up, but love edifies. And if anyone thinks that he knows anything, he knows nothing, yet he ought to know. And then it goes into kind of what Clayton was talking about, how it says some Christians slip into the sinful spirit when they speak with someone they believe is in error. They are more proud about what they know than loving toward the person who is wrong. Knowing this inclination, Paul writes, a servant of the Lord must not quarrel, but be gentle to all, able to teach, patient in humility, correcting those who are in opposition. And that's in 2 Timothy 2:24 and 25.
Good.
So it's about knowing, but knowing it well enough that you don't put it down on others, if that makes sense.
It does. It does. If you know it that well, you ought to know the attitude that you should hold that
exactly.
With.
I've seen that, and this is in a non-threatening way, I guess you would say, or not a very serious way, but someone who's learning, say, martial arts, for example, when they first start out and they start to learn a few different things, and they kind of want to use that on everybody because I know martial arts, I know this, I know that. But as they continue to learn, they become more humble about it and are, they know it, but no one else probably even knows that they know it, because it's not about showing everybody else that you know it anymore. It's about the art of knowing and the art of the knowledge more than just having it to be able to whoop up on everybody else.
Yeah, and it's a lifestyle too.
Yeah.
Right. How you use
like
that knowledge.
Yeah.
The Pharisees were notorious, and I've seen this too. I've grown up around a lot of law trusting, and there is law in the New Testament, but I've grown up around a lot of law trusting Christians, who did police and, where were you? And we were doing this and thought it was their job to, call everybody else out and be a judge, jury, and executioner at times. And those people always still have a tendency to add laws. And the Pharisees were guilty of that. It wasn't enough to rest on Sabbath. Now we got to make laws about how many steps that means. We have to make laws about whether or not you can rescue your animal or how you feed your animal. All these that God never mentioned, but they figure, well, we'll go the extra mile and we'll create, if the Torah, it is the books of law in the Old Testament, Genesis through Deuteronomy, it was commonly called a hedge around the Torah. So if you don't break past this line, then you certainly won't break this law. So they just kept adding laws. And so they were law trusting. And Jesus came in Matthew, his first quote unquote sermon on the Mount in Matthew 5-7 was trying to tell people, all right, I know that it's this, this, and this, but here's the heart of it. Here's what's behind it. It's not just a bunch of rules and jumping through hoops and checking boxes, that sort of thing. And goes back to that mentality you mentioned earlier.
Right. It's about becoming more mature,
right?
So that you're more humble about it, and it becomes more of the lifestyle than showing everybody that you can just do whatever it is.
Well, I can whoop you spiritually.
Yeah.
Well, I was thinking of your dad, and your dad would probably admit to this because he was a Marine. And what I noticed was guys who had been out of boot camp for a year, 2, 3 years, always made fun of the dudes fresh out of boot camp. Because the guys fresh out of boot camp were newly minted Marines that were just going to go up and they're bad. We're going to go to the bar and show everybody how bad we are.
Mm-hmm.
And the older guys would be like, yeah, you'll get over that. You ain't as bad as you think you are.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely.
I saw a really good quote. It says, very often a person's ability is their greatest liability because pride has spoiled it.
Hey, do it again. Say it again.
It says, very often a person's ability is their greatest liability because pride has spoiled it.
Creeps in too, doesn't it? I've known this story for years. It still boggles my mind. I thank God, that I'm not like this and this and this slob over here. And on the flip side, I don't know where we are in our timer here. The flip side is this guy. Is he standing? Is he kneeling? I forget all of a sudden.
He says standing by himself. No,
far off.
Far off, yeah.
That's right. And beating his chest. Now, I felt like that in confession to God. Like wanting forgiveness that badly, you know what I'm saying?
Oh, and he doesn't even lift his eyes up to heaven either.
Right.
Like he won't even look up.
Right. And so this humility thinks he's worthless. Be merciful to me, a sinner. Has no clue, probably, that Jesus would say between these two. He probably looks at the Pharisee and thinks, wow, look how great he is spiritually. And probably would never guess that Jesus would use him as the shining example.
And I mean, I see that a lot in today's society too. You'll have like the younger generation looking up to that older, generation who kind of does that. Because a lot of times when younger kids ask questions, we get shot down a lot because the older generation doesn't want to answer it.
That's right.
Or doesn't know. And then
that's probably right.
But and then you have the kids that look up to them like, wish I could get to that point.
Oh yeah.
But at the same time, you're like, it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to be humble. It's okay to not know.
Yeah.
You don't want to be so stuck in your ways that you're afraid to admit that you don't know something.
Exactly. That's exactly right. I don't want to leave you out of this conversation. You know me once I get rolling.
No, you're fine. You're fine. Yeah.
The humility, though, I was thinking of, y'all remember Matthew 25 where Jesus separates the sheep from the goats, talking about the judgment. And he tells the first group, let me see here. He tells the first group who are on his right, come, in verse 34, come, you who are blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, you gave me food. I was thirsty, you gave me drink. I was a stranger, you welcomed me. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison and you came to me. Then the righteous will answer him, saying, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? When did we see you a stranger and welcome you, or naked and clothe you? When did we see you sick? It's almost like, when did we do this? They probably feel like we're not worthy. People will say that to me sometimes. Oh, you know the Bible so well. And I go, oh, I'm stupid. I have so much more to learn. I should know this, all this other stuff. But they really don't know why Jesus is saying, you come in, you're righteous. I imagine that guy was probably, he said it. I'm a sinner. Please just be merciful to me.
And I was thinking along the lines of humility, another parable, which we may cover in different other detail in another video, of the great banquet, where Jesus is talking about when you get invited to this banquet, don't go sit at the head of the table, go sit in the back somewhere, and just humble yourself and sit back there. And if that's where you stay, then fine, you're still there. But there may be a seat come available that's at a more elevated position in this case, and you can be invited up to that, and all of a sudden you're being exalted because you were humble to begin with, rather than sitting at the head of the table and then getting embarrassed and say, sorry, you're in somebody's seat, you need to move. And then you feel like an idiot,
right?
Because you're trying to get ahead, kind of in vain, I guess, by just jumping ahead of someone else potentially.
Perfect.
Right.
We're going to be exalted. It's kind of the either or. Either I'm going to exalt myself and try to get approval from people on my own, or I'm going to let God do it. And that's the difference between these two. He had to tell God why he was so worthy of, forgiveness and God's love and mercy.
Like God didn't know already.
Right.
The all-knowing God didn't
Right.
know, so he needs you to tell him again.
It was Jerry Clower that told a story about keeping a list of all his good deeds in the front of his Bible. And he finally tore it out of there. And his wife said, which his wife's name was Homerline, by the way.
Oh, man.
That's rough.
There's one for redneck ramblers.
Yeah, really.
Homerline asked him why he took that out. He said, because I'm afraid when I get to judgment, God's list ain't going to be near as long as mine. So he quit keeping a list of all his good deeds he did. But James 4 says, humble yourselves before God and he will exalt you. It's exactly what we're talking about here. How do you get that humble, or how do you develop that humility?
I was reading earlier, and I found this little bit, and it kind of stuck out more in the earthly aspect, I guess, not so much in the spiritual. But it says, with a spirit of humility, people recognize that they will likely fail, but that their perseverance allows them to stand back up after the fail and move forward with confidence. Humble people are modest about their success and make it known to everyone that their failures don't define them. And I think that last part is so critical, because a lot of people with spiritual arrogance only look at the negative in people, whether it be 20 years ago or yesterday, And people, that's what they forget. They forget that people fall and they slip up and they make mistakes, but that they can get back up. And you don't define people by their mistakes. You define people of how they're trying, You look at their progress that they're making and not at just the mistakes.
The publican, do y'all know how he made his money? The tax collector. He collects taxes for Rome, which for the Jewish person, Rome is not who you love, because the Jews have been, what's the word, where you are your own governing group or your own country or your own body. Like, they've governed themselves and been autonomous. Is that it? Autonomous for their entire history. It was Genesis 49 that prophesied that the scepter would be removed from Judah. They don't make their own decisions. They are under Rome now. And so that's when they go to crucify Jesus, they got to go through Rome. And so now you got a Jew who's working as a tax collector for the terrible Roman government. And the only way, from what I understand, the only way they made their money was to take extra taxes because they weren't paid by Rome. So they had to basically, get their own tips.
Yeah. Raise the price.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Skim the top. Yeah.
And so they were thought of as just the lowest of the low. So given his job, how he was looked at, how he was treated, you could see why he felt like a piece of garbage. And there's a lot to that. It's a funny balance, though, isn't it? You want to be confident and secure, but then you want to be humble. It's tricky to balance that out without destroying your not your self-confidence, but your confidence. Anyway, that's sort of taking a left turn. Any other thoughts you guys had from this?
Me personally, is like the first thing when I read this that comes to mind for whatever reason is still just social media.
Oh, okay.
Everybody tooting their own horn all the time. And, I guess in some ways, if you're trying to build a business and you are your own personal brand, you kind of have to.
That's different.
To a point, yeah,
that's
a little bit different. But for every other individual that's out there doing that, you got to be really careful to not be more like the Pharisee whenever you're with whatever you're putting out there.
Even in the photos you post on there, you can make other people feel bad. You can post, even if it's not a facade, many times it is. And you look at other people and you go, their life's perfect. No, it ain't. They're a mess. But when I was talking to Laura years ago, Laura told me she wanted which we still don't have, but wanted a giant house. I was like, doesn't sound like you, because Laura's never been materialistic in that kind. Takes after her dad a lot. And I said, a big house? And she said, yeah, so we could take people in. She said, I don't want it too big, though. I don't want it fancy. I don't want it big because I don't want anybody to ever walk in my house and be uncomfortable. So I don't want it perfect and all that kind of stuff, but I want to be able to take people in or offer people a place to stay or that kind of stuff. And I thought, there you go. Me, I was like, I want a big house with fancy car, and I want to make sure I got it.
That reminds me so much of my granny and papa. I hear so many stories now. I never knew my papa. He died, I think, before my brother was born. But I knew my granny growing up, and I heard so many stories from like random people that I knew, or random people I didn't know, talk about how high they held my granny and papa because they went and they would stay with them, while they were in preaching school, or they would come in and they always had like an open house. And I always thought when I was younger, I want to be like them so much. They were so kind and loving, and to me, it's like a perfect example. I mean, growing up between them, my grandparents, my parents, I mean, I'm extremely blessed to have the family that I do. But when you're young, it makes such an impact, especially in a world that's so negative, to hear the positives out of people, especially the people you know and you are close to, and have that example to grow up like them. And to know that there's more to life than social media or what you look like or how big your house is or what car you drive. It's the things and how you treat people and how you try to live your life that really matters.
You don't remember what the arrogant person is driving, but you remember how the humble person treated you. And there's a lot of different thoughts. But as Dan said once, got to keep the main thing, right?
That's the main thing.
Yeah, the main thing is to keep the main thing. So the main thing is the last part of this passage, right? And it's about being, all right, Kelly.
Sorry.
It's fine. It's about being justified. I cannot be pleasing to God and be arrogant about who I am and display that no matter how many laws I keep, no matter how many times I go to church, no matter how many, all this stuff I could have done is absolutely worthless. Because that's what Jesus said. And I tell you, this man went down to his house justified rather than the other. Everyone who exalts himself will be humbled. The one who humbles himself will be exalted. I'd rather be humbled here and exalted later. Because that humility is awful, what he's talking about. And that's the sad thing, is the Pharisee probably thought, It doesn't get any better than this. And what a shock if he never learned. What a shock to be at judgment and figure out your arrogance cost you your soul. And to think that whole time.
Not a place I want to be at.
What's that?
I said not in a position I want to be in.
No, it's awful to think about. And the lesson is, of course, I don't know if we could go into it here. What's our time frame?
We're at 25 now. So
Gotcha.
5 minutes.
Wrapping it up, I don't know. There are ways to learn humility. I guess I was thinking of that. We didn't really put that in our notes, but to learn that humility, when I went to school, preaching school, they said don't come out arrogant, because a lot of those guys do. How much I know, which I thought was, when I left school, I thought how dumb, because I went to school and figured out how ignorant I am. And I was already preaching some, grew up in it. My dad was a preacher, knew, a decent amount, but I got in there, studied for 2 years, course hours equivalent to a 4-year degree, and came out thinking, I have so much to learn. And that can help you. When you start reading and trying to grow yourself, you realize how inept you are and how much more you need. And that helps you to stay motivated and remember who you are and who you aren't. You guys have any thoughts about how to keep away from this pride?
It's all a frame of mind, because, the way you're talking is one side of the correct side of thinking about it that
Right.
way. And then the other guys did the exact same thing. They thought about the wrong side of it.
Right.
They thought about everything that they had learned and thought they knew it all at that point, versus everything that they need to learn still,
Right.
and probably will never learn enough. Which it's which way you think about it is exactly what's going to determine whether you're going to be prideful or humble.
Paul, talking about Jesus, have this mind in you, which was also in Christ Jesus. It says in Philippians 2:7, he emptied himself. So the less I am about me and my life and my motivation. Pharisee was all about him, what I'm doing, who I am, all that kind of stuff.
Well, I thought of something just now. It's a lot of times when I slip into that mindset of, look at me, which I try not to do, but it happens. A lot of times I'll try to put myself in other people's situation.
Right.
Like if I was on the other end, like a lot of times I'll catch myself being snippy to somebody, and then I'm like, wait a minute. If somebody was being snippy to me, how would that make me feel? Or how would I react? Or how would I look at that person? How are people, that sounds horrible. How are people looking at me? But you don't want them to look at you and you be the reason that they never go to Christ. Because that happens a lot. I've heard many stories of people having one bad experience and being like, no, that's it. If this is what this life is about, I don't want it. And it's sad to think that some people are the reason that others won't go to Christ or won't come to know Jesus or come back to know Jesus.
Made me think of a question I've never thought of with this. How do you think the publican, the tax collector, would have responded if he heard what the Pharisee was saying? Would he snap back? Would he have jumped up and defended himself? He's a humble person. Because I have my own opinions. I think he'd have had his feelings hurt, but I doubt he'd have done much about it. I don't know. But it kind of begs to what you were talking about with the reaction and so forth.
Yeah, it seems to me like he probably wouldn't have been like, I already know that I'm like this, right? Not telling me anything new.
Right.
I get it, man.
Yeah.
It's like telling me I'm wearing sandals. I know.
I know.
Well, okay. Any other thoughts before we close out?
No. I think we're good.
Okay, so don't be arrogant on social media. Don't be arrogant toward anybody else, and don't tell everybody what all you've done for God, because he probably has a shorter list than you do. And practice humility. Don't we love being around humble people? Don't you just feel good? I want to be that person. All right. Till next time. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.